We begin this hour with a look at police reform in America, a public call for change reaching its strongest level in decades. A funeral will be held for Rayshard Brooks today in Atlanta. His death at the hands of police nearly 2 weeks ago gave that reform effort new urgency.
Protests against police brutality began in Minneapolis after George Floyd was killed there on Memorial Day. Demonstrations quickly spread to all 50 states and around the world. Nearly 1 month later, the city where it started is still working to make change happen.
Police unions, as you know, have a lot of influence in the way policing is done in this country. And critics say the Police Officers Federation of Minneapolis has resisted changes in the past. In an interview you'll see first right here on CBS This Morning, we spoke with the union's president. That's Minneapolis Police Lieutenant Bob Kroll is his name. We also talked to other leaders of the union. You're looking at Rich Walker Sr., Cheryl Schmidt, and Anna Hedberg. We asked Kroll why he told his members in a private letter earlier, quote, what is not being told is the violent criminal history of George Floyd. We also asked the union leaders if they see a larger problem with policing. Bob Kroll, do you think there is a systemic racism problem in the Minneapolis police force?
I do not. Racial issues certainly need to be addressed, and we are willing to work through that as we have done in year after year. Many years in the police department, we are all engaged. There are racial issues. Is it systemic racism? Not in my opinion.
A lot of people are throwing systemic racism in our police department. I can tell you as an African-American male, I personally do not believe this exists. Our city council is very diverse. We got a black attorney general. We have a black police chief. I am the first African-American ever elected to the Minneapolis Police Federation in 152 years. You know what I see? I see progress. We're progressing forward.
I think it's very hard. The only people I hear saying there's no such thing as systemic racism in the police department are police. I don't know how you move forward unless there's some acknowledgement about what people believe.
We can definitely acknowledge that people think and perceive that there's systemic racism, because that is all that is being said about law enforcement today.
Right.
I mean, it's really difficult to come up with the answer to seeing something so horrific.
Do any of you think there need to be reforms in the police department?
Certainly, absolutely.
What would you change?
Yes, and we want to be a part of that. I think we would be better served by listening to what the community wants to see changed and then work with them to implement that. I think the first thing that we need to do is sit down with community leaders and listen.
You brought up George Floyd's past history. What was the purpose in bringing up his past history?
Well, I did not bring that out in public, and you need to understand the context. Our officers had been literally under fire. They had been shot at 5 times in the 5 following days post his death. And it wasn't any intent of mine to question his history. The context of that was a scribbling of what we as a board had been working on and doing, and a morale builder, because our department had completely suffered a devastating hit to their morale, particularly when the 3rd precinct was given away. And I sent an email to the membership, period. And that was not intended to go any further.
But see, Bob, that's the thing. You're calling it a morale builder. The city's on fire because they feel this man has been murdered by a police officer. What is the purpose in bringing that up?
I didn't even bring the criminal history up.
So you're saying it was a private,
that was
note?
One small segment of a very lengthy letter, and it doesn't say anything about what's contained in the criminal history.
Under what circumstances, Bob, do you think a police officer should lose his or her job?
Should lose?
Should be fired.
That's just a wide, I'm sorry, but that's just a wide open end of hypotheticals that I couldn't begin to answer. I'm sorry.
Is it so wide?
We could sit for the rest of the week and play out scenarios where they could and should lose their job. There's a false narrative out there also that we appeal and fight all discipline and win it, and that's simply not true.